Mysterious dude with no face.
So it happened at the beginning of summer 2017 at 3 a.m. One night I went drinking at a friend's house. Long story short, 3 people in a small bed was nothing short of annoying, so I told them that I would just walk home instead of staying over, as it wasn't that far anyway. I left my car there with the intention of picking it up the following day. I'd settled with putting regular clothes over my PJs for the trip because I was lazy, drunk, and it was chilly out at that time of night. Ready, I left the house and started walking. On the very first street, I crossed a man walking in the opposite direction. Wanting to see if he had gone on his way, I looked back and saw him standing there on the other side of the street, looking straight at me. I got chills down my spine and tried not to let my imagination run wild as I continued on. Suddenly, I heard steps behind me. I glanced back and saw that the man was a few feet behind me, now walking in the same direction and on my side of the street. I began to freak out, but I was reaching a big street with a lot of lights and thought I would soon be in the clear. Every time I'd look back, I couldn't see his face, as they were obscured by a baseball cap and hood. I was yearning for him to show me his face, smile, and say, "I'm not following you. We're just on the same path." That didn't happen. Still panicking, I decide to cross the street to gain some distance between us. Because of this, I ultimately had to cross the street again and then pass in front of him to get to my street. I decided to enter 911 on my phone without actually making the call, just in case. I was still trying to convince myself that he wasn't stalking me. If he were still following me when I got to my street, I'd go through with the call. So I crossed the street again, passing in front of him at a distance, and got to my street. I used the opportunity of the cover of the buildings to jog ahead, but stopped short, not wanting him to see me hurrying away. If he'd started chasing at a run, I would come out the loser. Again, steps sounded behind me. It was him. I went through with the 911 call just to talk to someone and maybe gain some sense of security until I got home. The agent on the phone asked me if I wanted the police to assist. I said no, that maybe this was all paranoia, and I just needed to talk to someone till I got home. He asked me if I was on 8th Avenue, and I answered that yes, I was. Damn, that felt good. My cell location had given him the clue. So then the agent asked me to describe the man that was following me. Dark blue jeans, black shoes, a gray hoodie zipped all the way up, and a black baseball cap that hid his face. Arriving at my apartment building, I dashed inside and secured the lock. I thanked the agent on the phone, telling him that I was home safe and heading down toward my apartment. Looking back to the front door one more time to see if everything was okay. I saw the man peering in, likely watching to see which apartment I was about to enter. I freaked out. I asked the 911 agent to send the police now. When the stalker saw me looking at him, he pulled away, crossing the street to sit on a bench in front of my building. I was so afraid to go into my apartment, not wanting him to know where I lived, especially since I was in the basement and my windows were street level. But I couldn't just stand in the hallway until morning, so I went into my apartment, not turning on any lights, and discreetly closed all my curtains. I was shaking. Looking out, I saw the police spot the man and then begin talking to him. Searching him, they then escorted him to their car and took him away. I went to my bed in shock. After a while, I nudged the curtains open again. All I could see was the empty bench the man had been sitting on. I didn't really sleep that night. I thought of everything that could have happened to me if I hadn't contacted the police and had instead just faked talking to someone, like most people do. I'm from Canada, and here the police can't arrest someone unless he's been in possession of a weapon or was in the process of breaking his parole. So yeah, mysterious dude with no face. Let's not meet again.
The man following me in Walmart.
This was a couple years ago when I had just moved back to the city I grew up in. I was separated from my husband and about to start the divorce process, so I was still getting used to this single mom thing. I had to go to Walmart one day and had no choice but to take my 5-year-old and 1-year-old daughters along. I was pretty distracted dealing with my 5-year-old, who at the time loved running too far away from me in the store. Thankfully, this isn't a story where she was snatched, but I had noticed a man in the same aisles as us for a while, which I brushed off as a coincidence. We got to the candy aisle and was looking at something on the shelf. When I turned around, the man was right behind me, like his face was probably in my hair. Still, I wanted to believe the best and said I'm sorry as I assumed I was in his way. I noticed someone with a walkie-talkie tell him to come with him. Still being naive, I assumed he was stealing. I paid for my items and went to leave when I was stopped by loss prevention/security and asked to come with them, which was scary and embarrassing. I knew I hadn't stolen anything, so I assumed my kids had pocketed something. The person who pulled me into the room said, "You're not in any trouble, but I really think you need to know what was going on. Did you notice the man following you?" I said, "Yeah, I saw someone near us, but I assumed it was a coincidence." They asked to make sure I didn't know the man and it wasn't some weird sex thing. Then they informed me the man had been following me and my kids around, masturbating. They didn't know why me or if he was interested in me or my girls. I was horrified. They informed me the man had been banned from the store, and they walked me to my car to make sure we left safely. I don't know why they didn't call the police, and in hindsight, I should have. I was just so freaked out and wanted to get me and my kids home safely. So, to the man masturbating behind me in Walmart, let's not meet.
The robed man.
So this happened in 2013. I was returning from basketball practice. At the time, the practices were held pretty late for a 7th grader, around 10 p.m., meaning we would finish around 11:30. I would also add that it was a snowless winter, meaning cold wind, darkness, and dead trees dominating the streets, which made an even creepier atmosphere in the small town I live. I was entering my neighborhood at a dimly lit intersection with no living soul in sight, not even a stray animal. I looked around into the 2 dark corners in the intersection because they had always activated my paranoia of being watched. The 2 corners had no street lights, so complete darkness had been next to me on both sides, which was a fairly uneasy feeling for an easily scared 7th grader. I looked to the right and saw dead leaves and trees and a couple of neighborhood houses. I looked to the right, and apart from the stuff written above, I saw a man. Ordinarily, I would not have been bothered, but he was dressed in a robe and had been standing in the middle of the dark street. I looked, so did he. I started to get that uneasy feeling when you know that something's wrong, when suddenly he raised his arms and started dashing towards me. I was frightened, and I ran so fast like never before in my entire life. When I rushed my way to the next intersection close by my house, I had turned around to see the man gone. He had disappeared, and shortly after I have entered the safety of my home. It has been a few years. I stopped playing basketball, but I am going to my friend's home gym at roughly the same time, around 10 p.m., and I always get scared whenever I approach that intersection in fear of seeing him again. So, robe dude, let's not meet. Also, this happened in Serbia if anyone is interested.
Are you here all by yourself?
This was years ago and I was just a kid, probably around 8, 9, or 10, old enough to walk across the street to the market alone. We had had a townhouse less than a block away from the grocery store, so if I ever got $1 or something, I'd walk over there to get candy. I walked over to the store as usual, perusing the aisles, seeing what I want to get, and I noticed this man looking at me. Not a big deal, but he just creeped me out from the jump. I grab my stuff and get ready to check out. Guess who ends up checking out right behind me? The same dude. Even as a kid, my instincts were telling me danger. He tries to make small talk in line and asks, "So, are you here all by yourself?" I mumble yes, not wanting to be rude, but that kind of weirded me out too. So I finish paying and I know the man will be following shortly, so I decide not to start walking home until he leaves. He comes out, sees me, and goes on his way. I watch him get into his car, but then he keeps doing laps around the parking lot slowly, as if he's waiting for me to walk. This was in the late 90s, before cell phones were anywhere, so I ducked inside and asked one of the grocery store workers if I could use the phone so I could call my mom to pick me up. I also tell the worker why, so she grabs one of the guys and we all walk out so I can point him out. When he sees us, he takes off. My mom ends up coming and picking me up, and it's pretty anticlimactic, but that's the end of the story. I remember this so well because as an adult, I'm sort of impressed with my young self, toots own horn, for being so aware of my surroundings. Anyhow, creepy grocery store man, let's not meet.
The prison guard who would appear in the least expected places.
Hi everyone, long time lurker, first time poster. I've thought about sharing this story several times, and I'm finally getting around to it. This is going to be sort of long, so I apologize in advance. This takes place when I was about 10 to 12 years old, 2-year age gap because it occurred over about a year and a half. When my mom would pick me up after school, we would occasionally stop at a gas station or the Walgreens down the street and pick up a snack. So, on this particular day, we pulled up to the Walgreens and waited in the car while my mom finished up a phone call. As we're about to get out of the car, a small red vehicle pulled up. I'd already whipped open the door on my mom's minivan and was ready to jump out when the driver of the car got out of his vehicle. He was a bigger guy, about 6'3", and heavier set, with gray, balding hair and a beard. He smiled at me when he got out and said, "Well, I didn't notice you two." My mom just turned to him and half-heartedly laughed, and he ended up striking up a conversation with us. The conversation was relatively normal at first, but then turned personal. He noticed my red jacket and goes, "Oh, you must go to all-girls high school academy. I should have known. All you academy girls sure are pretty." I was super confused because 1, I was 10 and didn't look old enough to be in high school, and 2, my uniform was definitely visible and looked nothing like the ones they wore at the other school. Me, being a dumb 10-year-old, corrected him and said, no, I go to elementary school. I'm only in 4th grade. He just laughed and said, well, you sure look nice and pretty enough to be an academy girl. At this point, I could tell my mom was both annoyed and uncomfortable. He was leaning into the car, blocking my ability to get out. He started telling us how he is a guard for one of the prisons in the city, and how he can be demanding and rough if he needs to be. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, all of those tough inmates are terrified of me. I'm a big guy. I could really hurt someone if I need to. My mom ended the conversation around this point, saying we were in a rush, and the creep finally moved from the doorway of our car. We walked into the store, and he got back into his car and just sat there. He never went into the store. My mom started fussing at me for telling him my name, age, and what school I went to, and the stranger danger finally started to settle in. When we left the store, he was gone. Flash forward to about 6 months later. I'm with my mom at a Walmart about 25 minutes away from where our first encounter took place. My mom and I are at the register checking out, and she realized she forgot something. She sent me to go get it, and on my way back to the register, I see the same man stop dead in his tracks and stare at me. Well, hey, Missy. I was wondering when I'd get to see you again. I just stared back at him for a second before mumbling a quick, hey, and walking off to meet my mom. As I'm walking away, I hear him say, under his breath, I need to get around to that one. And when I looked over my shoulder, he was still staring at me. After this encounter, I figured it was just a coincidence. It's a large city, but at the time, we only had 2 or 3 Walmarts, so maybe it was just an accidental run-in. I told my mom about it, and she made me promise that if I ever saw him again, I'd let her know. A year later, I'd all but forgotten about the creepy prison guard. My sister and her husband had been visiting us for about a week, and they were packing up to leave. We followed them to one of the gas stations around the corner from our parents' house, so my parents and sister could get gas. I went in with my mom and sister to get one of those styrofoam ice chests and a couple of other things. I ended up wandering around the small store on my own. It didn't take long before I ran into, you guessed it, creepy prison guard. This time, I was really creeped out. The Walgreens where I first encountered him was across the city, maybe 45 minutes away from my parents' house, and the Walmart was also a good distance away. This gas station was less than a mile away from my house, and it made me severely uncomfortable that this guy who gave me the creeps was so close to my home. He smiled at me, almost like he'd been waiting for me. But before he could talk to me, my mom and sister appeared around the corner. My mom grabbed my hand, told me we needed to check out, and started to walk towards the register. Creepy guy put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't have to pay for all that. I have an ice chest in my car. You can come with me to grab it and we'll be right back." Of course, my mom wasn't having it. She kept telling him it was fine, we didn't need it, but he kept insisting, even after we'd paid for everything. He followed us out to our cars and only stopped insisting that I come with him to get his ice chest when he saw my dad and brother-in-law. He tried to strike up a jovial conversation with them and even ended up walking to his car behind the building and grabbing his ice chest. He tossed it into the bed of my brother-in-law's truck, looked at me, and said, "It's always nice running into you, Missy." My mom never told me what came of it, but she called the police and the prison he worked at and filed complaints. Knowing the police force in that area, I'm sure that nothing was done, but it's been nearly 11 years now, and I haven't seen him since that last time at the gas station. So, creepy prison guard who showed too much interest in a 10-year-old girl, let's not meet ever again.